I get asked all the time, is an IEP only for academics? The answer is no. An IEP is for so much more than academics, including it can be a fantastic travel hack for parents who are looking to travel with confidence with their child who has different learning needs. So let's go ahead and talk about it on this episode of the Special Education Inner Circle podcast. I'm your host, Katherine Witcher, and yesterday I had a really strange travel day. So I had to get up at 4 in the morning. I hop on a plane. I go to Texas, had to drive over to Oklahoma, and then end up going back to Texas. And I'm home the same night. That is just strange to me. That is not how I grew up. I grew up, we have a family of four. So it's my mom, my dad, me, and my brother who has Down syndrome. And we grew up with road trips and not like fancy road trips like we're going to go see some great national parks. No, we're talking like road trips to go see family 8 hours away in Missouri with a, cooler, a loaf of bread, peanut butter and jelly. I can remember twice we made a trip down from Illinois. That's where I grew up, from Illinois down to Florida. And those two times my dad didn't come with. So my mom asked her best friend to come with so we could split the gas money. I can remember all the conversations and just this real frugal way of traveling, which takes a certain set of skills. We're budgeting, we're being safe when we're stopping on the, at gas stations or at rest areas. That's one set of skills to travel that way. I used another set of skills yesterday when I had to do all this plane travel to go finish up a project that I was working on. And every time I go into an airport, and I think it's because even though I've been traveling for so long by plane now, I can just remember growing up, like that wasn't an option. So airports, I love airports. And I'm like looking around and I'm seeing all the numbers and all the signs and all the things. And my brain can't stop thinking about IEPs and how we need to support our families' long term goals. So, as parents, teachers, admins, therapists, we need to be thinking long term and not just think outside the box, but think about true meaning and purpose of an IEP, which is to prepare a child for further education, employment, and independent living, which is going to absolutely include some version of travel. So, whether it is travel by car or travel by plane, whether it means going to fancy restaurants or a loaf of bread with peanut butter and jelly and making some food on the road. Whatever that is, there are skills within all of that. And we need to make sure that we are looking beyond the traditional kind of thought about IEPs, that it's to, help students keep up with their peers or close a gap or learn as many kind of, I'll call them traditional academic skills as possible. That's not just what it's about. In fact, when you think about all the skills that we need for travel, time management, waiting in line, asking for help, changes in the schedule, that always happens while traveling. All of those things are skills that can be practiced and mastered inside of the school setting. And then we can generalize them out in the community, right? So when I was a teacher, when I thought about community, and how I was going to teach my students skills that they could use within the community, I wasn't thinking this way. I was thinking about community signs, which are very important. I'm like, here's our stop signs, here's our yield signs, here's our crosswalk signs, here's the helpers in our community, and we learn all of those things. Those things are absolutely important and awesome to have as part of the learning experience. But then taking that to the next level and thinking about how are we going to take the skills of waiting in line and apply that in several different areas? How are we going to work on not always setting up our schedule to be perfect during the day and making sure that nothing goes wrong, because we don't want any meltdowns, because in real life things go wrong, right? Like schedule's going to change. We're not going to always, have that expected experience, and we have to be able to shift how we're going to deal with that. These are all things, again, we can work with inside of school. And I want to make it clear, this is something that always comes up when we start talking about life skills, and travel is a life skills. There's still this negative kind of cloud a lot of times around the term life skills or self-contained classroom. And I get it, self-contained classroom, like that's an old-fashioned term, but we still use it all the time in special education. When I talk about learning the skills that are needed for travel, so let's just say that a parent has a goal that they want to do either this road trip with their family or they want to get on a plane. It's your job, parents, that you have to communicate this with the school and then let the school start to use some of that skill of academics and applying it to these areas. And that makes IEP goals quite exciting. It makes it like there's a real purpose to why we're learning to budget this way. There's a real purpose to why we're learning how to ask for help. There's a real purpose to all of these different skills of even waiting in line, which can seem like such a burden. And a lot of times we find workarounds for that inside the school environment for our students who can't wait in line as long. And even when we go to places, whether it's, Disney or Universal or, just like amusement parks, we still have to wait even in our access lines. So there's disability access lines, there's still some type of waiting no matter where you're at. So there are these skills that we need to integrate. So when we're talking about our life skills or our academic skills, we don't have to separate those out into separate classrooms. So a child who is in general education classroom some or majority of the day can absolutely be working on life skills. That's why I bring up that waiting in line. There's a lot of waiting in line in general education. Okay, a lot. And so when we're talking about our life skills classroom, I'm never going to say that that's going to limit a child from having access to general education curriculum or general education experiences in there. So it's important that when I'm talking about this, that we're not limiting it to a certain environment. These skills that I'm talking about for travel, that absolutely, again, parents, this is up to you, or teachers, you can ask the families. I know that parent inventories can be super boring and you may not even get them back, meaning like that sheet of paper that you might send home before an IEP meeting, like, what are you hoping that your child works on next year? No, ask fun questions. Are you guys planning any travel? Are you worried about safety? Are you worried about communication? Like, let's have a real life conversation about what we're working towards. This is about taking our classroom and bringing it into community experiences. And that doesn't mean that we have to go grocery shopping during the school day. Okay. Now, there are some programs in special education that, yes, that's part of their program, especially as we get up to the 18 to 22-year-old type transition programs, that there's some more experience in that. I'm not talking about having, an elementary age student take their school day to go to the grocery store to learn community skills. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about taking these skills that are going to be lifelong. So they go from classroom to community, and then they grow with the child into the real world of what this looks like. It really takes kind of this IEP goal picking, right? Like, which goal should we work on? A lot of times we kind of get in a slump about like, well, we learn this and then we learn this next. And we're not thinking about how we can broaden our conversation into skills that are going to have long-term, huge, meaningful impact, like all the skills that go along with traveling. So I want you to think, if you are a parent, do you have concerns about traveling with your child, and how can you communicate those to your team? And don't wait for the annual IEP meeting, because there are things that the team can be working on right now, absolutely, but you have to bring that up as a concern. And teachers, you can have this conversation with parents. This is a great parent teacher conference kind of conversation, especially if you feel like, okay, like we cover everything, because a lot of times we're talking a lot in special education, right? Like sending the emails home, sending the daily sheets home, sending the weekly updates, sending all those things. So have a conversation that talks outside of the classroom into real life, and figure out how we're going to bring that conversation back around into what skills we can work on together inside of our IEPs, formally and informally inside of the programs. So, all right, I'm excited to hear. Are you going to have the conversation about travel? Wherever you're listening to this, you can leave a comment, you can share this. I'm going to put a link where you can drop some comments and questions. So if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you can see that link right there. And then also, if you could leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, that would be so helpful. That helps get more of this information out to teachers and parents who are struggling to really bring special education to that next level for what we need for our next generation of students. So, all right, I will see you guys next time on the Special Education Inner Circle podcast.